You need to watch this if you crave chills down your spine. Welcome to Soul Studios. Here, true crime meets the unknown. Suspense lurks in every shadow, and supernatural forces whisper from the dark. We craft chilling, edge-of-your-seat short stories inspired by the eerie, the unexplained, and the most haunting mysteries. 3 new stories drop every week, each one darker than the last. Are you ready to step inside? Subscribe now before the next story finds you.
When a young man inherits his estranged grandmother's remote farmhouse, he moves in hoping to renovate and sell, until strange things begin happening at night. Every morning, deep fingernail scratches appear on the walls, always fresh, always in new places. As the messages become more desperate, he realizes someone, or something, is trying to show him a buried truth the family was never meant to uncover. What follows is a terrifying unraveling of secrets, haunting warnings, and a discovery that changes everything he thought he knew about his own bloodline. Subscribe to Soul Studios for more true-feeling horror stories where silence hides secrets and the past never stays buried. I woke in darkness to a sound that froze the breath in my lungs. It was a slow, deliberate scraping, the unmistakable scratch of fingernails dragging across wood. My heart stuttered and then pounded in my ears, loud as a drumbeat in the silence of the old farmhouse. I lay rigid in bed, listening, my fingers clenched so tightly around the blanket that my knuckles ached. The only light was the faint red glow of my digital alarm clock reading 3:12 a.m., barely enough to outline the shapes of the furniture in my room. For a long moment, the house was deathly silent once more, and I wondered if I'd dreamed the noise. Then, somewhere out in the hallway, a floorboard softly creaked under no weight at all. My mouth went dry. Slowly, I slid my legs out from under the covers and set my bare feet on the cold wooden floor. The boards were icy and uneven, and they groaned softly with each cautious step I took toward the open bedroom door. I reached for the baseball bat I kept propped against the nightstand, a paltry comfort on these lonely renovation nights, and held it in front of me like a talisman. Each breath I took sounded too loud. I forced myself to take another step, then another, until I was peering out into the unlit hallway. The darkness there was complete. I fumbled along the wall for the light switch. My fingers found it, and I flicked it up. The old wiring in this house was fickle. The lights flickered weakly, buzzing with an electric hum before stabilizing in a dim amber glow. The hallway stretched out to both sides. To my left, it led toward the front staircase and the foyer. To the right, it ended at the door to what had been my grandmother's study. Nothing moved. The air was as still as a photograph, heavy with the smell of dust and old wood. Yet I could feel something, a charge, like the atmosphere before a storm, raising the hairs on my arms. I took another tentative step forward. The floorboard beneath my foot creaked again, the sound loud and accusatory in the quiet. At the exact instant, a whisper of movement rushed past me, a barely perceptible breeze that ruffled my hair and extinguished the small nightlight I had plugged in near the floor. I spun around, heart hammering. Bam! My shoulder collided with the wall as I staggered, swinging the bat at empty air. There was no one there. Only the settling groan of the house around me, the faint buzz of the light bulb overhead, and my own ragged breathing. I stood there for what felt like hours, my back pressed to the hallway wall, straining to catch any hint of another sound. Just as I was beginning to doubt myself, I saw it. Several long, pale gouges in the wood paneling of the wall across from me. They were about shoulder height and fresh, the raw wood pale against the aged varnish. My stomach lurched. Those marks had not been there when I went to bed. Swallowing hard, I edged closer. The gouges weren't random. They formed letters. Jagged letters, crudely torn into the paneling by something like human fingernails. I traced them with the beam of my flashlight. My shaking hand had finally found it on the hall table. L-E-A-V-E. Leave. A cold swell of dread washed over me. Was someone in the house playing a vicious prank? Or something else? My mouth worked, but no sound came out. Behind me at the far end of the hallway, I heard a faint whisper, a hiss like escaping steam, or a distant voice trying to form my name. That was enough. My courage broke. I stumbled back into my bedroom, slamming the door and twisting the old key in the lock. I didn't sleep for the rest of the night. I sat on the bed, clutching the bat, jumping at every rustle and sigh the old house made, until the grey light of dawn crept in. Sunrise brought a fragile relief. In the daylight, the house felt different. Dusty sunbeams slanted through the hallway windows, and the chill of the night before seemed almost foolish. Almost. I unlatched my bedroom door cautiously. The hallway lay in front of me, harmless and dim, the light bulb I'd left on overnight now burnt out. But the message was still there. Leave. The word glared at me from the gouged wood, raw splinters fringing each letter. In the morning hush, I traced a fingertip over one of the grooves. The edges were ragged and flaked. Tiny bits of wood fibre crumbled at my touch. It was real, not a nightmare, not my imagination. A shaky breath whooshed out of me. I suddenly felt foolish, standing there in my boxers with a bat at my side and terror in my eyes. If someone had broken in to play this prank, they were long gone. And if it had been something else? Well, it wasn't showing itself now. I tried to steady myself. My pulse was finally beginning to slow, leaving me exhausted and jittery. I needed coffee. Downstairs in the kitchen, I fumbled with the ancient coffee maker and watched the dark liquid drip into the pot, my mind churning over possibilities. I'd only been living here a week. Barely enough time to unroll a sleeping bag and strip a few wallpapered rooms. I was a city boy, unaccustomed to country silence and creaky old farmhouses. Maybe stress and isolation were getting to me already. After all, I had never believed in ghosts before. I wasn't the superstitious type, just a 27-year-old trying to fix up the property I'd unexpectedly inherited. The property in question was my late grandmother's farmhouse, a place I hadn't set foot in since I was a child. She passed away barely 2 weeks ago. We had been estranged for years. Ever since a bitter family argument when I was in middle school, my parents had cut off contact with her. I could count my memories of Grandma on one hand, a stern, wiry woman with wind-chapped cheeks, the smell of peppermint and soil when she hugged me, a lullaby she hummed when I was little and frightened of the dark. Then, one summer when I was 11, something happened. A shouting match between my father and her. We left and never came back. I never even knew what the fight was about. In the years that followed, she became little more than a ghost in our lives, a distant name mentioned in strained tones, until I got the call that she had died and left her house. To me. The funeral was a blur, just a handful of distant relatives and neighbours in the pews, my father standing off to the side, stone-faced. Father O'Connor, the local priest who presided, pressed his card into my hand afterward, telling me I could call him any time if I needed to talk or felt lost coming back to the old home. At the time, I'd nodded politely. Now his words took on a new weight. I never even saw Grandma's face to say goodbye. It was a closed casket service, supposedly at her own request. It struck me as odd. Grandma had never been vain, but I was too overwhelmed to question it. 2 weeks later, here I was, alone in her crumbling farmhouse on the outskirts of Shirley, trying to make sense of her legacy. The plan was to fix the place up enough to sell. I took a leave from work, figuring a few weeks of DIY renovation might also be a chance to clear my head of the city and maybe, belatedly, get to know the woman I hadn't seen in so long through the remnants of her life left behind. I certainly hadn't expected this. Otherworldly messages carved into walls at night. I considered packing up and driving straight back to the city in broad daylight. In fact, I threw my half-finished coffee down the sink and had my truck keys in hand at one point. But I stopped myself at the front door. This was my house now. My grandmother's gift to me, inexplicable as it was. If there was some kind of spirit here, did it really mean me harm? The sheer terror of the night had suggested malevolence, but in the calm of day I wasn't so sure. What if it was Grandma's spirit? The thought gave me pause, a complicated tangle of hope and dread twisting in my chest. She'd left me the house. Would she want me gone from it? Or was she trying to warn me about something? The idea of her ghost watching me made me feel uneasy in an entirely different way. I decided to stay. At least one more night. I told myself it was out of stubbornness and practicality. I couldn't abandon a property like this without a fight, but part of me also felt a strange obligation. If Grandma's memory still lingered here, I couldn't turn my back on it so easily, even if it frightened me. To fill the day and calm my nerves, I threw myself into work. Demolition was first on the agenda. Grandma's decor was well past its prime. I spent the morning tearing down cobwebbed curtains and lugging mildewed furniture out to the barn. The physical labor was a welcome distraction, yet every sudden noise still set me on edge. More than once, I froze mid-swing of a hammer, convinced I'd heard someone shuffle behind me or whisper my name from a shadowy corner. Each time, I found nothing but my own thundering heart and dust motes swirling in the air. By afternoon, I moved to the old study at the end of the hall, the same hallway where the word leave remained scratched. I hadn't dared to scrub it off yet. I wasn't sure if I wanted it gone or if I needed the proof that it had really happened. The study door creaked open to reveal a musty room frozen in time. Dust lay thick on the bookshelves and the ornate roll-top desk. Faded floral wallpaper was peeling at the edges. As I began carefully stacking yellowed papers and emptying drawers, I felt like an intruder in this preserved piece of Grandma's life. I found old utility bills, a brittle photograph of me as a toddler on her knee. I paused at that one, my throat tightening, and a tin box full of loose buttons and thread. Everything smelled faintly of stale tobacco and that peppermint scent I remembered from her favourite candies. Setting aside a ledger, I accidentally knocked a little hardcover notebook off the desk. It hit the floor with a thump, startling me. I exhaled a shaky laugh at my jumpiness and bent to retrieve it. It was a journal, bound in green cloth. The pages fanned open to one of the last entries, dated a few months ago. My eyes snagged on my own name, scrawled in spidery ink. Heart pounding anew, I sank into Grandma's old armchair by the window and began to read. It was her diary. In terse, lonely lines she wrote about the farm, the weather, and always at the margins, her regrets. She mentioned me several times. Miss my Charlie. He must hate me now. It's for the best, one entry said. Another, I hope one day he understands I never wanted this distance. Tears pricked my eyes as I realized how much pain our estrangement had caused her. She had tried calling a few times over the years. I remembered my father angrily hanging up the phone once, but eventually she stopped. In her final entry, a shaky hand had written, "If you ever read this, Charlie, I'm sorry." The ink was smeared as if by tears. I shut the journal, hands trembling. I hadn't expected the surge of emotion tightening my throat. All this time I'd thought of her as a stranger who perhaps didn't care, and here she was pouring her heart out on paper. The guilt was almost harder to bear than the fear. I whispered hoarsely into the empty study, "I'm sorry too." My voice sounded small and hollow. If Grandma's ghost truly was here, could she hear me? And if so, was she the one tormenting me at night? It didn't add up. The diary in my lap spoke of love and sorrow, not malice. A sudden chill swept through the room, ruffling the pages of the journal. I startled. The window was shut. The day was warm. Yet the draft had come and gone in an instant, raising goosebumps on my arms. In the silence that followed, I heard the faintest sound behind me, near the door, like a single fingernail tapping on the wood. When I turned, nobody was there. But I knew I hadn't imagined it. Something had acknowledged me. That evening, a late summer storm rolled in. Rain battered the roof and streaked the window panes. The old house seemed to swell and groan with the rising wind, as if protesting the weather. I busied myself patching a cracked piece of plaster in the hallway, but my eyes kept drifting to the word leave, still etched there. I ran my fingers over the scars in the wood one more time, then painted over them with a coat of primer. Covering it felt like taking a deep breath after hours of tension. Maybe I was foolish, but I spoke aloud as I rolled the paint on. "I'm not leaving. Not yet. Talk to me, please. Tell me what you want." My words faded into the steady patter of rain. Exhausted from a nearly sleepless previous night, I settled onto the living room sofa with my blankets rather than the upstairs bedroom. If something happened again, I wanted to be nearby, and a part of me hoped that my presence there might encourage any Any spirit to try communicating more directly, where I could catch it in the act. I set up my phone on the coffee table, camera pointed toward the entry hall and staircase, recording just in case. Then I turned off the lights and let the sounds of the storm lull me into a light, fitful doze. Sometime deep in the night, I snapped awake. The grandfather clock in the foyer was chiming the hour. But I counted only 3 reverberating strikes. 3 a.m., of course. Thunder rumbled in the distance and the house was strangely dark. The power must have gone out. In the intermittent flash of lightning through the windows, I could see my phone on the table, still recording with its tiny red light. All was quiet besides the storm. I held my breath, straining to sense any presence over the drumming rain. That's when I heard it. A muffled scritch, scritch, scritch coming from somewhere below. It was faint, almost drowned out by the weather, but unmistakable. The sound of something scratching, digging. And it was coming from the basement. Gathering my courage, I grabbed my flashlight and the bat and crept toward the basement door off the kitchen. With each step through the darkened house, the scratching grew louder, more frantic, like nails raking desperately at wood or stone. I reached the door and found it already ajar. Yawning blackness beyond. My heart hammered against my ribs. I aimed the flashlight and descended the creaky wooden steps one by one. The basement air was damp and cool. As I neared the bottom, the beam caught a swirl of dust in the air. Dust that was drifting from the far corner of the cellar, where an old brick wall stood partially obscured by shelves of canned goods and paint buckets. The scratching noise was coming from inside that wall. I stood transfixed, my light trained on those bricks as the scratching intensified, then abruptly stopped. In the sudden quiet, I realized I was holding my breath. A trickle of loose mortar dust skittered down the wall. My mind raced. Was I really hearing a ghost clawing to get out? Or was something somehow trapped in there? Summoning a shaky voice, I croaked, "Hello!" The only answer was a faint tap-tap from behind the bricks, as if in response. I took a step closer, drawn by a morbid curiosity stronger than my fear. The flashlight beam danced over the mortar lines. The wall in this corner didn't quite match the rest of the foundation. The bricks here looked newer, the cement brighter. Why would there be a new patch of wall in an old cellar? My skin prickled with a realization I didn't want to accept. Something was off. Very off. Suddenly, a whisper brushed against my ear, so close that I felt the breath of it stir my hair. "Help me." I whirled around with a yelp, swinging the flashlight beam frantically. There was no one, nothing but barrels and darkness. My nerve broke completely. In a blind panic, I fled. I pounded up the stairs 2 at a time, nearly tripping, and slammed the basement door behind me. I stood there in the kitchen, chest heaving, staring at that door as lightning flashed one last time through the window. In that flash of white light, I could have sworn I saw a figure standing at the door, a gaunt silhouette, head tilted in sorrow. I backed away slowly, whispering shaky assurances to the empty air. "I'll get help. I'll figure this out, I promise." If it was Grandma's spirit, maybe she understood. Maybe she would forgive my cowardice for bolting. My words fell into the hush as the storm began to pass. No more scratches, no more whispers. Only the soft patter of rain on the eaves remained. I must have slept a little eventually, out of sheer exhaustion, because the next thing I remember is the weak morning light and my phone alarm chirping. Every muscle ached as I dragged myself up. The memories of the night hit me like a truck. The scratching inside the wall, the whisper pleading for help, the silhouette, and the terrible realization forming in my mind about what it all meant. I needed help. Not from the police, not yet, not without understanding, but from someone who might actually believe me. My trembling fingers found the card Father O'Connor had given me. Within an hour, I was sitting in the rectory office at St. Mary's, across from the priest, cradling a cup of hot tea I could barely hold steady. I recounted everything, from the first scratches to the messages and last night's harrowing encounter in the basement. The words spilled out in a rush, and with them came tears I didn't know I had. Father O'Connor listened intently, concern etched on his kindly, time-worn face. "You're sure it said help me?" he asked gently after I finished. I nodded. My throat was too tight to speak. He let out a slow breath and steepled his fingers. "In all my years, I've learned that when spirits reach out like this, it's rarely to do harm. More often, they're trying to be heard, to right a wrong or deliver a warning." His eyes searched mine. "Your grandmother? She was a devout woman and a good soul. I don't believe she would wish you ill. If her spirit is here, I suspect these scratches aren't threats at all. They're warnings." "Warnings," I echoed, my voice hoarse. Father O'Connor nodded. "She might be trying to show you something hidden. You mentioned scratching in the walls, trying to dig something out. It's possible she's guiding you to whatever is trapped there." He paused, voice growing even softer. "Given everything you've described, I think we should have a look at that basement wall." Relief and dread flooded me in equal measure. He believed me, and he was willing to help. I exhaled shakily. "Okay, will you come with me?" "Of course," he said, managing a reassuring smile. "You shouldn't be alone for this." He hesitated, then added, "Before we go, let's say a prayer for courage and clarity." I nodded, and we bowed our heads. As he spoke softly in Latin and English, calling for protection and guidance, I closed my eyes. For the first time in days, I felt a measure of peace edge into my heart, bolstering me for whatever we might find. The house felt different with Father O'Connor there by my side. The afternoon sun slanted through the windows as we carefully descended into the basement, flashlight and tools in hand. Even in daylight, that far corner was cloaked in shadow. The priest held out a crucifix in one hand and murmured a quiet blessing that echoed off the low ceiling. I pointed to the brick section, heart thudding. It was right there. I heard it behind this wall. We cleared aside the clutter of shelves and paint cans. Dust tickled my nose. Up close, it was obvious, a roughly rectangular patch of brick and mortar that didn't match the older stone foundation around it. Maybe an old coal chute that had been sealed up, or something else entirely. My mouth was dry as I picked up the sledgehammer I'd brought. Father O'Connor stepped back, nodding for me to proceed. With a deep breath, I swung the hammer. Crack! The sound rang out as bricks and mortar shattered. I hit it again, harder, fueled by nervous energy and a deep mounting dread. Crack! Crash! A section of the wall crumbled inward, revealing a dark hollow behind it. A foul, sickly sweet odor wafted out, the stench of death long concealed. I gagged, stumbling back, but Father O'Connor placed a steady hand on my shoulder. "Easy, son." His expression was grave, and I saw his throat bob as he swallowed. Coughing, I swept the flashlight's beam into the void. The light caught on something pale. For a moment, my brain refused to understand what I was seeing. Then it clicked. Bones. A human skull. Jaw agape in an eternal silent cry. I stifled a scream. There, curled within the shallow brick alcove, lay a desiccated human skeleton clad in tattered scraps of clothing. A faded blue dress, the same colour dress I remembered from old photos of Grandma. Around the neck, a thin glint of metal, a locket I recognised as hers. Oh my God. My voice broke. I dropped to my knees, nausea and anguish crashing over me. It was her. It was my grandmother. She hadn't been peacefully buried 2 weeks ago. She'd been here all along, bricked up in her own cellar. My stomach heaved, and I pressed a hand over my mouth, tears blurring my vision. Father O'Connor crossed himself, whispering a prayer under his breath, his face ashen. As the shock settled into my bones, horror gave way to a sick realization. Grandma had been murdered. And not just murdered. Whoever did this entombed her like a piece of unwanted trash. My shaking flashlight beam roamed the small space, and I choked back a sob. Deep gouges scored the brick around her skeletal fingers. I could see where her nails had splintered against the walls. One was still embedded in the mortar, a yellowed crescent of keratin. She had tried to claw her way out. She was alive when whoever it was sealed her in. The thought sent a howl of rage and sorrow through my mind. I don't know how long I knelt there, shattered. Eventually, Father O'Connor gently guided me back upstairs, away from the grisly sight. He made the sign of the cross at the top of the basement steps and murmured something about notifying the authorities. I agreed numbly. Shock was giving way to white-hot anger and confusion. Who could have done this? Why? Grandma was a stubborn woman, but a kind one. She didn't deserve that. No one did. We'll call the police. Father O'Connor was saying quietly, "And your family? They need to know. My family, my father." A leaden weight settled in my gut. He had been the one to arrange the funeral, to insist on the closed casket. He'd said it was what she wanted, but he lied. A memory from that terrible fight years ago resurfaced. My father yelling, "I'll take care of everything, you ungrateful old witch," in a moment of rage. As a kid, I'd not understood. Now, a horrible possibility formed. Could my own father have had a hand in this? My mind recoiled, but the pieces were snapping together with dreadful clarity. I thought of his cold demeanour at the service, how quickly he ushered the burial along, how he never spoke about what exactly happened to Grandma, only that she'd passed in her sleep. All lies. I staggered to my feet, fury and grief coiling tight in my chest. My hands were smeared with dust and something darker. I realised I was still clutching Grandma's locket, which I'd taken from around her neck with trembling fingers. I pried it open. Inside was a tiny photo of me as a child, smiling and gap-toothed on her lap. The sight blurred as tears filled my eyes. She had kept me close, even sealed in darkness. "I'm so sorry," I whispered to the locket to her. "I'll make this right. I swear it." Father O'Connor touched my shoulder. "I'll phone Detective Ross, one of our parishioners at the police department. Why don't you step outside for some air?" I nodded, but instead of going out, I found myself moving in a daze to the old landline phone on the hall table. Almost without thinking, I dialed my parents' number. My mother picked up, but it was Dad's voice I demanded through my raw throat. A moment later, he came on the line. "Dad," I said, voice shaking with barely controlled rage. They found Grandma." "Here, in the house." There was a long silence. When he spoke, his voice was oddly flat. "What are you talking about?" "Her body, Dad," I hissed, "bricked up in the damn basement wall." My composure cracked, anger spilling out. "She didn't die peacefully 2 weeks ago, did she? You knew, didn't you?" His response was immediate, a thunderous denial. "Have you lost your mind, son? How can you accuse me of—" But I heard it, the telltale tremor underneath his words. He was lying. My father was a lot of things, but he'd never been a good liar. Hot bile rose in my throat. "What did you do?" I choked out. "What did you do?" "Enough," he barked, but I could hear panic fraying his tone. "Don't you dare throw wild accusations at me. Get out of that cursed house. We'll sort this out." Before I could scream back, a sudden burst of static hissed through the receiver. I heard my father's voice break off, replaced by an eerie crackling silence. "Dad?" I pulled the phone away, confused. The line was still connected. Faintly, I heard him calling my name, but it sounded distant. And then I heard it. A wet, scraping sound like fingernails on glass. "What the hell?" my father muttered on the other end. In the background of the call, a new sound rose, a hollow tap. Tap, tap, just like I'd heard in the study. My blood turned to ice. "Dad, get away!" I yelled into the handset, unsure of what was happening, only that she was there. He shouted something I couldn't make out, a cry of surprise or terror, and then the line went completely dead with a sharp click. I stared at the phone, heart in my throat. "Dad! Dad!" There was no answer, just a dial tone humming into my ear. A cold draft wafted through the foyer then, circling around me. The front door was closed, but I felt a presence there with me nonetheless. Whether it was the spirit of my grandmother or just my own shock twisting my senses, I couldn't tell. But I swore I heard a whisper intertwine with that draft, bleeding through the static silence. Not yet. I slowly set the phone back on the hook, my hand trembling. In the broken light of that autumn afternoon, I caught a glimpse of the hallway wall where I'd painted over the word leave. The primer was peeling away, and faintly underneath, those letters were bleeding through once more. Leave. A warning I finally understood. Not a threat to me, but a desperate plea to flee from the darkness that had festered in our own family. A plea I would never again ignore. I stepped out onto the porch just as Father O'Connor hung up with the police. I felt hollowed out, forever changed. Behind me, the house was quiet now, but I knew this silence was the eerie calm before years of reckoning to come. We would have to answer for the secrets scratched into these walls. As we waited for the authorities, I realized the horror might never truly be over. The echo of those nocturnal scratches will always live with me. Even now, I can still feel them. Fingernail marks etched deep into the wood of that old farmhouse, and deeper still into the grain of my memories, refusing to fade. If you inherit a house, check the walls before you decorate them. Sometimes the structure holds more than just old beams. My grandmother didn't die peacefully. She was buried alive in her own home, and her ghost was the only one who tried to save me from the truth. Now that the house is silent again, I'm just waiting for the scratching to start somewhere else. Some walls whisper warnings, others scream to be torn down.
Every story has an end, but here, the mysteries never stop. Thank you for watching and being a part of this journey into the unknown. Your support keeps these stories alive, and there's plenty more waiting for you. We drop 3 new stories every week, so if you crave suspense, the unexplained and the downright chilling, make sure you're subscribed and ready for what's next. Until then, keep your lights on, your doors locked, and remember, some stories stay with you long after they're told.